Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. Well, it's that time of the year again. It's time for Valentine's Day. And many African Americans are wondering if they should celebrate Valentine's Day, wondering what it is that they are participating in. And there is also an African centered alternative to Valentine's Day, and it's called Akoma Day. Akoma Day, Akoma, Akoma Day. And we're going to be joined here in a few minutes by the founders of Akoma Day, Montsho and Nwasha Edu. You've seen them on the African History Network before, and we're going to talk about this African cultural alternative to Valentine's Day, which is Akoma Day. Now, Akoma Day is celebrated on February 14th through February 20th. Okay, and there's seven principles. There's Akoma Day has seven virtues. It has seven principles and seven symbols. All right, so we're joined here by Nwasha and Montsho Edu to give us more information about this cultural celebration of Akoma Day. Hotep, everybody. How's everybody
Okay.
doing? All right. Excellent, excellent.
Greetings.
Greetings. So I was giving people some information about Akoma Day, and we've had you on here before on the African History Network. And we know Valentine's Day is coming up, but people are wondering, okay, what does Cupid have to do with African culture and African history and Black love? So we know Akoma Day was originally created in 1997, then revised in 2001. But give us some background information on Akoma Day and the significance of the Akoma symbol.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're happy to be back, brothers. Good to see you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So basically, the Akoma, the symbol that we are commonly calling the heart, we're miscalling it the heart. It's actually a divine symbol of African culture. And I think for Akoma Day, it's the most important thing to understand that this symbol that we see all through social media and all through the world is actually an African symbol that really represents the divine unity of the art and science of soulmating. So as you can see there,
Science of what
the
you
Akoma is not a heart. It is not
Mhm.
it is not the organ that's in the chest that pumps blood. Um, it is a symbol of divine unity. So if you look at the bottom part of the Akoma, you will see
Right.
that represents the spiritual realm where man and woman are connected. As it begins to ascend upward, and you see the two separate humps that
Yeah.
reconnect, that represents the rites of passage and trials of life, like we say commonly today, hump day. And that man and woman coming from a spiritual center at the bottom, being literally connected as one being, separating, and then through their trials, through their education, through their life paths, reconnecting to point back to the center from which they came. This is where the concept of a woman coming from a man's rib or a man coming from a woman's rib in patriarchal religion, we get it as a woman coming from a man's rib, but it was told in both directions, a man coming from a woman's rib. And even today, we say that the wife is the rib of the man, or the man is the rib of the wife or the backbone. It just references that we share bone, sinew, right? This
Okay.
all comes from this ancient symbol that has many, many concepts about it, but it is now popularized just as the heart to represent deep love, which it also represents that. But we want to make the distinction and reclaim our cultural symbols, um, especially in the celebration of love. So Akoma Day is about decolonizing concepts of love. So we're not romantic. We don't need Cupid. We don't need all of this new stuff that has come about. because since ancient times, we've had love poems, we've had love monuments, we've had the celebration of love, and literally Lupercalia, which is the
Yes.
Roman Greco celebration that later became Valentine's Day, is
Right.
actually based on or a co option of an ancient African celebration that was a week long. And this is part of the reason in our attempt to Sankofa that Akoma Day is actually a week long, celebrated from February 14th to 20th to commemorate fertility and love around the planet because it happens to be one of the most fertile, the most fertile time around the world. And so that's just some of the introductory symbolism around Akoma Day. But the first thing to note is that the Akoma is an African symbol that is not to be confused with the heart. And actually, we should give reverence to our ancestors and actually call it by its correct name and stop calling it the heart. And that's a big challenge for a lot of people, the way they've been, conditioned.
Right. Okay. Now, you mentioned the festival of Lupercalia, and we know that Lupercalia was a fertility festival that was dedicated to the Roman deity Faunus, or Faunus,
Mhm.
Faunus. It was a Roman deity of agriculture, and this is where this is the part of the origins of the Valentine's Day for Europeans. Now, also, it's important to note that Lupa is the
Wolf.
in Roman mythology. Lupa is was the she wolf who nursed Romulus and Remus,
Remus.
and the two little infant boys that go on to found. One of them goes on to found Rome, according to their mythology. Um, so, talk about. You said there was an African festival before Lupercalia was created, and Lupercalia was celebrated on the equivalent of February 15th in ancient Roman society. Talk about that African festival that predated Lupercalia.
Yeah, so the festival is in through the research we find out that the Greeks and Romans were as oftentimes were emulating something they had seen.
Right.
Now the challenge is we just don't know the name of the celebration.
Okay.
But through research we found that they were actually co-opting and corrupting some of the things that they saw. This is coming from their actual documentation about, the festival of fertility, as you said, that was taking place in the interior of Africa that was celebrated with dance and love and the commemoration of love and fertility, the birth of life, etc., which then became corrupted by them into the festival of Lupercalia that went from the highlighting of individuals and their life purpose and their the celebration of their life to the choosing of names and rape and molestation and a lot of things that were antithetical to love,
Right.
or the love as we understand it to be. And so, Nwasha, if you want to talk about just some of the things that were going on in the festival of Lupercalia.
Well, I think, some things, as many things in history and culture, are misunderstood if you don't understand the origin. So, when people view a festival, understanding that there is divine partnership, that there is conscious conception, there can be a misunderstanding of how, as we know, ancient Greek and Romans misunderstood even how to conceive, right? How a woman was impregnated. So one of the activities during Lupercalia was to, of course, advance the next generation. So what would happen, as Montsho was saying, is just putting names into the collective and pulling a name is not the same as conscious conception. So in
Okay.
Lupercalia, all available women would be, and girls, right, would be available for men to pull their names to be able to have sex with them. And if they wanted to, they could marry them after that. So this is where Montsho is saying, there's not necessarily the consent of the women participating
Right.
in that. This is just, we want to continue to have babies. So you're a woman, you're available, you're of age, you're put in there. And if we want to afterwards, we could marry you. But even that is not really up for consent for the woman. Um, and, this is some of the things that the Catholic Church was trying to clean up the idea of orgies and, promiscuity and, sexual assaults and, that type of thing. So this is where we have, maybe you can give one name, right, and say, be my Valentine. It's kind of like a trickle down, a little bit watered down activity. But
Right.
also, like we were saying, men didn't understand how women were actually conceiving and having a successful pregnancy and birth. So women were also beaten during Lupercalia in order to ensure fertility, which that has nothing to do with being fertile. But again, there's a misunderstanding of how the body works and, what is actual science. These are things that our ancestors have hundreds of years, thousands of years, and documentation that they understood conception, pregnancy, even contraception. We have documentation that we understood how and when a woman could be fertile, how and when someone could be pregnant, and how to make sure, to the best of our ability, that that is a successful birth and a successful, you know, pregnancy. So I think that when we often don't know Lupercalia, of course, because we're another few thousand years removed from that.
Right.
So what we have is just like you said, the Cupid. Again, a watered down version, even of Valentine's Day, I would say, to the point that we are now pushing Valentine's Day even to children, where even when Valentine's Day was really started, it would have still been with what the culture was considering consenting adults. So the watered down version that we get of Valentine's Day, or the origin of Valentine's Day, is from Saint Valentine actually marrying people, which again would have been, according to that legend, right? The people who wanted to get married is who he was marrying, because there was an edict that soldiers could not get married at the time, of
Exactly.
course,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because if you
Right.
have a family, if
Right.
you're going to care about your life, and you also may care about others' lives, but because they just wanted the soldier of a machine, it was, don't get married, don't have children. We want, kind of like now, we
Yeah.
want you to join the military when you're 18 before you actually start a life, because you would care a little bit more about your life and others the more that you get into life and have your own legacy and your own future in front of you. So that the idea of Saint Valentine is these people who really wanted to marry and really wanted to love each other, he married them. And then this
Right.
is where we have the myth of Valentine's Day is all about love, and again, like the intimate love. But you can't really erase the time period and some of the practices from Lupercalia.
Right.
And we also have to acknowledge, especially Black people, any Black people around the earth need to accept and appreciate and hold with the highest regard that we had stories of love before Rome. We had stories of soulmating. We have the first soulmate story on the planet. And we had monuments built in love and poetry on love and the divine understanding of love from the celestial realm to how life recreates itself even on the planet. And I think that when you limit yourself to something like Valentine's Day, even if you go back and say, I know it's coming from Lupercalia, we often don't go beyond our oppressors' stories and our oppressors' mindsets when we're looking for the truth of the world. So we only go back
Right.
as far as they say it's good to go back. And that is the challenge.
And we,
Even though, Lupercalia has its crazy practices, we need to
Right.
understand that some of those practices were a misunderstanding of what we were already doing,
right.
because the Greeks and the Romans are by default our students of classical African culture.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Even the month February is named after the skin that they were whipping the women with, the bloody skin called febra.
For February.
Now we're
Right.
in the month of February, and so you know, so much. The reason that the function of Akoma Day is to help Black people throughout the diaspora decolonize, because we are perpetuating misogyny, we're perpetuating colonization, we're perpetuating mental slavery when we perpetuate these holidays, customs, and ritual that don't have anything to do with us, like Cupid and many other things.
Right.
Um, Cupid has a whole different story that a lot of people misunderstand. Cupid had two arrows. One was, I think, gold, and the other one was pewter or something like that.
Like, yeah, steel or something
Steel,
like that.
and one was to make people love one another, but the other one was to make people who were at peace and at harmony and in love to hate one another. So when Cupid appeared, it wasn't seen with a lot of reverence. People would run from Cupid in the mythology because, you know, if I'm out with Nwasha and here comes Cupid, he can break us up by an arrow. And so he was seen as a mischievous deity, cherubim, that then evolved into Casper, the friendly ghost, that is the mischievous little ghost that's moving around. And, you know, and so
And even
a
when,
lot of those things come from a corruption, really, of the Twa people, like the Smurfs and the trolls and all the little,
Yeah,
the
the leprechaun.
leprechauns, and
Right.
they all come from the Twa, who are the, you know, had dominion over the equatorial forces of the interior of the Nile Valley. And so it's important for our people to understand that.
Right. And just very quickly here, because and the reason why I want to deal with some history of Valentine's Day and Lupercalia, then we're going to continue with Akoma Day and talk about the 7 virtues and 7 principles and 7 symbols of Akoma Day, is because African people in this country have largely been stripped of our history, culture, language, spiritual systems, etc., folklore, mores, celebrations. And then we've been taught to celebrate these European holidays, and most of us don't know what we're celebrating. Most of us have not studied the history of what it is we're taught to celebrate. So we just blindly follow these things that, you know, are much of it is anti-African. Okay. And you talked about how it perpetuates misogyny, etc. Okay, so for reference here, people could check out this article here from History of Valentine's Day from history.com, official website of the History Channel. This is one reference that you can look at, and you all in your book you probably talk about this as well.
Yes.
But this piece right here, if we go back, it says, let me see, where is it? Emperor Claudius. Okay.
Mhm.
The Catholic Church recognizes at least 3 different saints named Valentine and Valentinus, all of whom were martyred. One legend contends that Valentine was a priest who served during the 3rd century in Rome. Okay, and this gets into Emperor Claudius II, who I mentioned a minute ago. When Emperor Claudius II determined that single men made better soldiers than those with wives and families, Emperor Claudius II outlawed marriage for young men. Valentine, realizing the injustice of the decree, defied Emperor Claudius II and and continued to perform marriages for young lovers in secret, as you all were just saying. Now, when Valentine's actions were discovered, Emperor Claudius II ordered that he be put to death. Still, others insist that it was Saint Valentine of Terni, a bishop who was the true namesake of the holiday. He too was beheaded by Emperor Claudius II outside of Rome. But then it gets into the history of the festival of Lupercalia. Okay, origins of Valentine's Day, a pagan festival in February, and it talks about how there was an attempt to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, celebrated at the Ides of February on February 15th. Lupercalia was a fertility festival dedicated to Faunus, the Roman god of agriculture, as well as to Roman founders Romulus and Remus, the 2 little boys I was talking about, right? To begin the festival, members of the Luperci, an order of Roman priests, would gather at a sacred cave where the infants Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, were believed to have been cared for by a she-wolf, Lupa. The priest would sacrifice a goat for fertility, a dog for purification. So they would kill a goat and a dog. Then they would strip the goat's hide into strips, dip them in sacrificial blood, and take to the streets, gently slapping both
And they're
women.
saying gently slapping.
Yeah, gently slapping both women and crop fields with the goat hide. Far from being fearful, Roman women welcomed the touch of the hides because it was believed to make them more fertile in the coming year. Later in the day, according to legend, all the young women in the city would place their names in a big urn. The city's bachelors would each choose a name and become paired for the year with his chosen woman. These matches often ended in marriage. Now I don't know if the women consented or what, but this is
that's a really big sanitation of the history.
yeah, this is and there's more. People can read the rest of this article. There's more there, but this is the craziness that is behind Valentine's Day. So, you know, when I was a little kid in first grade, second grade, things like that, they told us to bring Valentine's Day cards for the girls, and the girls do it for the boys, things like this. But they ain't teach us any of this stuff.
Right.
They didn't teach us what we were practicing, what was behind all of this. So talk about Akoma Day and the 7 virtues of Akoma Day.
Well, this is why we are bringing Akoma Day to the world, because sometimes people know the history, and sometimes, truthfully, people don't, because even our teachers don't know the history. When you're indoctrinated with something at such a young age, you don't have a memory of actually learning about the thing that you're practicing. So this is how a lot of our colonized culture is. We can't remember when we really were introduced to Valentine's Day because it's at such a subconscious level that we don't even know what it stands for. So we put what we want onto it instead of what it actually is. And this is why it's important to not only tell someone, you know, not to celebrate Valentine's Day if they care about their ancestors and they care about love and their relationship, but to offer them something that actually nourishes their relationship, supports their relationship throughout the year, and gives them a sense of fulfillment. Because many people, and I think people know if they're listening, that celebrating Valentine's Day by the 15th, your relationship is not necessarily better. And sometimes it's in worse condition because you're not happy with what happened on Valentine's Day. So the virtues of Akoma Day are virtues that we feel as relationship counselors and as, you know, a couple who's been together for a couple decades. These are things that we know that you need in order to have a fulfilling relationship. So the virtues of Akoma Day are flexibility, patience, faithfulness, consistency, endurance, fondness and goodwill, and forgiveness. So this is a cycle of the virtues that you need to hold for yourself and for the other person so that you can actually be successful in relationship. You know, like we have to be flexible because sometimes we need to relax our boundaries in order to let someone in. And sometimes we have to hold our boundaries in order to, you know, stand on what we believe in. We also have to be patient because we're two different people with two different lives with, you know, even in the diaspora, you know, if you're celebrating Akoma Day, we say that these are things you would do for yourself first and that you would do for all others. We need to be patient with each other because there are levels to decolonizing. So when we're engaging with people, we are unified, we are a group, but we're not at the same spot at the same time all the time. And we also have to have faithfulness, you know, in our ancestors, in our future, in our present, that we can actually solve our problems ourselves using our culture and our psychology. We have to, of course, maintain consistency in a relationship because that's what someone is looking for in order to trust us. And that's what we have to do, even for ourselves, so we can trust ourselves. And it takes a level of endurance, which Black people have proven that we can endure in many, many, many areas. But when it comes to relationships, we sometimes let those relationships go so quickly that we can't get over the challenges or can't get through conflict or any of those types of things. So we absolutely need to have a level of not struggle of, not settling,
Right.
true endurance. And then we have to treat each other kindly. So the fondness and goodwill is you, if you can be kind to a stranger and say thank you and open up doors and be polite and smile, you can absolutely do that with the people that you say you care about the most. So just being kind and having goodwill towards each other is extremely important because we're often more courteous, again, to our oppressors than we are to each other. And even through all of that, we have to have forgiveness because you need something that can restore and reset your heart and your mind. So and that includes for yourself as well. When you have fallen short, if you know you have fallen short of your word and your highest, aspiration, so has probably another person. So we have to be able to come to true forgiveness where we can move forward. So, not forgetting, but canceling the silent debts that we have with each other so that we actually can build on a new foundation.
Okay, so those are the 7 virtues of Akoma Day. We have flexibility, patience, faithfulness, consistency, endurance, fondness, goodwill, and forgiveness. Okay, now explain the 7 principles of Akoma Day.
So the principles are dealing with unity, right? And so the virtues are things that we embody as individuals to share in our relationships, but then the principles become the magnification of those virtues in action. So principle number one is purpose. We got to have purpose in all things that we do. We talk about what is the purpose of any agency or what is the purpose of a machine, but we don't know to understand love or relationships as having purpose. In a family, a mother, a father, the children all have purpose. In love, we should have purpose. In life, we should have purpose. This is indigenous
Right.
to African culture. Then we must have unified labor. We must work together toward a thing to fulfilling the purpose of that love. Once we begin to work, we have principle three, which is transformation, unified transformation. We transform together. When a man and a woman come together, start a family, they change. They're no longer, the best parts of them are not lost, but there is anybody who's been in love or anybody who's been in a relationship, anybody who has a child or has any major life event, when you share purpose with someone, you share work with someone, you go through a change together, and there's parts of yourselves that grow, some parts that fall off and die. So unified transformation is number three. Number four is unified fruit. It stands for the actual children that we bear, but also the fruits of our labor. When we work together, we're going to have mental, spiritual, mental, and physical children. So this is the unified fruit. And so often today we're looking at our children as individual parents without the reverence for the other partner parent that actually brought this child into the world. We say, this is my son, or this is my daughter, or this is my project, or this is my car, or my house. But there was a unified work that brought about that fruit. And then we have unified body. It's the collective coming together of us, Black people in the Western world, Black people in the Southern Hemisphere, Black people throughout the diaspora. We are a collective body that must come together and unify. And we need to understand that we can be unified without being uniformed. I always say, look at the hand, you see the thumb and the pinky are not alike, but they on the same hand and they can strike a mighty fist. And so we don't have to be uniformed, 5 pinkies or 5 thumbs to be unified. So we need to come together as a unified body. We must have a unified mind, number 6, that says we are thinking all the way back to that first principle of the unified purpose in all thought, speech, and action, in our love dispensation of our personalities and our function. And then finally, we must have a unified soul as a couple, but then a unified spirit as a group. So sometimes in the West, we get the the concept of soul and spirit confused. The soul is the
Okay.
individual personality, but the spirit is that divinity, that divine part of yourself that's eternal. So you show up as Montsho or Nwasha, you're temporal, but your spirit, the infinite mind, the eternal mind that's in you, is eternal. And so we have to have that unified soul as a couple, and then that unified spirit as a collective. And so those are the seven virtues and principles, and they're to be shared. So the first day of Akoma Day on the 14th, we would hold up flexibility and unified purpose. Day two, patience and unified labor. Day three, faithfulness and unified transformation. Day four, consistency and unified fruit. Day five, endurance, unified body. Day six, fondness and goodwill and unified mind. And then day seven, forgiveness and unified spirit. And so those are the focus of virtues and principles of the 7 days of Akoma Day.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. So we have unified purpose, unified labor, unified transformation, unified fruit, unified body, mind, spirit. Body, mind, spirit. All right. Now you have there are seven symbols that represent its purpose
Yeah.
also. The seven symbols dealing with a coma day, and then there are three main colors: red, pink, and white. So talk about the seven symbols of a coma day.
Yes. So the first primary symbol is actually the Akoma. We want to re-educate people about this symbol. There's so much symbolism. As you can see in our company logo there that you just had is right behind us. We symbolize
Mhm.
the ancient story of the sacred science of soulmates, how they were connected as one being, separated, and then reconnected to point back to the center from which they came. When a child or a boy or girl was born, there were people in ancient culture in the southern part. They called them Moamageddis. They had different names for them in different regions, but they functioned the same way, kind of like today's doula or midwife. And their function was
Okay.
to divine the purpose of a child when they were being born. And they would you try to Moamageddis would consult to find out what is the other part of this purpose, because the symbol represents a literal story. It's not just symbolic. It's amazing to believe that you as a man, me as a man, Nawasha as a woman are actually the other part of a whole picture. And so we called these people, we were searching for who is the other part of our soul, and hence the term soulmate was developed. And so we talk about the Akoma in all of its dynamics. Is so much to understand about the anatomy of the Akoma, why it is shaped the way it is, and this symbol actually appears in nature, all through nature. So it is an eternal symbol that has meaning, that has very profound meaning. So we have the Akoma on the altar. Then we have the Sankofa that looks very much like the Akoma to an extent, that represents the return back to our culture. The We have to have a connection to our lifeblood, which is our tradition, our customs, our mores, as you said, our language, even. So that's number two. Number three, we have Capepio wa Akoma, which is the butterfly. The African butterfly in the genus is the most diverse and beautiful butterfly in the insect kingdom, and it represents unified transformation. It represents the transformation that we go through when we love, or when we work at love, the cultivation of our character, as our ancestors called love. Then we have the Mazao wa Akoma, which is the fruit. What happens when we work, we bear fruit, as we discussed. And this
Right.
represents not only the physical fruit of our labor, like our children, but also those institutions that we build, like the African History Network, that can serve as a conduit for the education of our people. That is the fruit of your mental labor and those people that have assisted you. So then we have the Ubeli wa Akoma, which is the unified mind symbol. It is the feather. All throughout African culture, especially the Nile Valley, we use the ostrich feather because the ostrich can turn its head 360 degrees while standing still and represent deep spiritual wisdom. But it also represents the lightness that the heart should be weighed against in the judgment scene of Ma'at. And
Right.
as the psycho Cupid is a cherubim for Valentine's Day, Ma'at is the anthropomorphic symbol of Akoma Day. So we have the Ubeli wa Akoma. Then we have the Mushima wa Akoma, which is the candle holder and the candles, the three colors of red, pink, and white. We have three red that represents the elders, the chiefs, and the judges of African culture, the ancestors. Whenever you see in African and Asian culture the color red, you're actually looking at the blood, you're looking at the ancestors, you're looking at the true and living culture personified by man, woman, and child. In this case, the elders, the judges, and the chiefs in African culture. Then you have the three pink candles, which just represents the three is reality
You
manifestation.
there?
Can you hear me, brother? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were breaking up a minute. That last.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
That last sentence you were breaking up.
Okay. So
Go
pink.
ahead.
Pink is the color of intimacy. This is, if you look in the 9 holes of your body, you see pink. And a lot of people don't realize that in African culture, we use pink throughout. This is not a new thing. We use the color pink to symbolize intimacy. I was taught this by one of my premier Jegnas and shown it, Queen Afua, who taught, we sat at the feet of Queen Afua, Dr. Africa, many great Jegna, but it was Queen Afua that taught me about 25 years ago that you know, this is a color that we use in rituals for intimacy, right? So pink, and that goes on today, which is where I believe the Greeks and Romans, or Americans actually, are really the ones who popularized pink for Valentine's Day. It wasn't even back in ancient times. And then we have white. White, the single white represents the purification and the initiation. Every year for Akoma Day, we have a different theme. This year, the theme is Initiate Your Love, and it represents to initiate, to begin, to start something, but it also represents initiation. So whether it's the Candomblé, the Zulu, the Vundun, the Nile Valley, Kemetic in Ghana, wherever you go in Africa, when it's time for initiation, you wear white to symbolize purity and to symbolize like a blankness that you're, as a clean slate, you're coming in to receive. Now, we often call Europeans white people, but they're actually not white. We use that term, but they're actually not white people. So this is not to edify those people. This is what our ancestors have been doing for time immemorial. You can go and look on the temple walls today and see everyone in white. Whenever you're going, I just watched the Wakanda Forever movie. Whenever we're going
Right.
through transformation or even our life cycles, we wore white in to weddings and to funerals. And so this is an ancient custom that has gone all around the world. And again, it has its roots in African culture, and many Black people in the diaspora don't understand that. And so those are the symbols. They're to be displayed on the altar, the Akoma altar, and you can, as we utilize the virtues and the principles, there's a slew of activities that you can do, gift ideas, celebrations. We've been celebrating around the country for the last 22 years and having community celebrations where hundreds of people come out, and then having individual celebrations. And now the holiday is spread to like 16 countries in the world. People are doing amazing things with Akoma Day. They either celebrating it one day, there's groups that celebrate it 7 days. So we get so much feedback. We get invited to come out. We get pictures and videos of things happening all around. And so we're honored that people are starting to pick it up. It's starting to gain a lot of momentum. I'm going to say it's probably like maybe 35,000, 40,000 people around the world. And it's not a lot of people, but it's growing. To have something come from your heart and mind, share it with the world, and then see people in New Zealand, in Germany, in the continent, in Ghana, Eritrea, Abu Dhabi, in France, in various different places, all through the States and Canada, Brazil. A dear friend told us one time they were in Jamaica and they went to go see this wherever they were in this region. It's like the guy who is supposed to be the best with the healing herbs, and went into the hut to see the brother and said that he had an Akoma Day book in the hut. And I was blown away by that story. And there's just so many stories that we hear every year that I could go on for days. But yeah, that's where we at, brother.
Well, Montsho and Nwasha Edu have been featured on NBC News, OWN, Oprah Winfrey Network, Aspire TV, blacknews.com, the Amsterdam News, MSNBC, ABC News, Essence. They've spoken at the All Black National Convention. They've been featured in Essence magazine and also here on the African History Network show. So they get around. So more and more people are learning about Akoma Day. Now, there's a Akoma book also that you have. So talk about the Akoma book and how can people get it?
People can get the book. This is the book that Montsho's been holding up and reading from.
Okay, Akoma Day, and what is
a guidebook into the sacred science of soul mating and cultural alternative to Valentine's Day. So the book is separated into separate parts, as the subtitle suggests. So we're going to talk about the state of relationships right now for us and why we sometimes have the challenges that we do. And definitely that our oppression and colonization are a part of that. We also talk about, of course, Akoma Day. And we talk about Valentine's Day and why we should not be celebrating Valentine's Day, and a little bit more on the virtues and the principles of Akoma Day. And then the final part of the book is over, let's see, 28 exercises.
Yeah, we had a few different versions.
Yes, 28
this one has
exercises
like 28 versions
that you can do for yourself or with someone else or as a family or as a community. Those exercises are based on the unifying principles that Montsho was talking about. So there's going to be a couple of exercises under each principle that you can actually do. And this is to bring unification. So the exercises under the principles are all about soul mating. So we talk about the true story of the science, the art and science of soul mating, and what it is for our ancestors, that we were created and are created in perfect pairs that are complementary and meant to reconnect on earth. And that is your actual true soulmate. And we talk about how we can use the science of soulmating and the art of soulmating to have that unified connection with anyone. So this is why it's so important to do. First, yourself, you have to unify, your mental self, your emotional self, and your physical self. And we have to unify with our partners. Definitely right now for Black men and Black women, we need to be able to appreciate each other complementary in a complementary way, but we also need to actually come back together and unify. As Montsho was saying, not be exactly the same, but understand how we are unified. So this gets you started with the 28 exercises that you can do that actually make you use your mind and your heart with someone else's, which is the way to actually practice unification. It's not a theory. This is why we call it a guidebook, because this is something that you actually have to do beyond hearing about the virtues and principles and saying, yeah, that makes sense. You need to be able to actually practice it if you want anything different in your relationship. And I think we're at the time where it's easy to absorb information. I was just looking at something that said the average person takes in more in a day than our great grandparents took in all year, because we have things
Right.
like TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and all these ways to take information in. But we are also, we're not as healthy as our great grandparents were. We're not as wealthy in many aspects, and we're not as practiced in some of the fundamentals. So
And we're
this
not
book,
together.
and we're not together, right? So this
Right.
book is really about, it gives you more than enough to do for the life of your relationship. But if you want to pick something to actually start under each one of the principles, it helps you activate your creativity to say, I'm going to go to the altar as our ancestors did and still do. Or, in the diaspora, we still go to the altar for the spiritual intervention into our relationships. And then what can I actually do here with another person and with myself to bring this principle to life in my everyday living? So if you want to get a copy of the Akoma Day book, you can go to a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly, Akoma Day book with a capital A, capital D, capital B. And we will send you out a copy. And we also have ebooks. So you can definitely get an ebook and start reading tonight.
Now, is that at your website
Yes,
also, akomahouseinitiative.com?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So we have the website up here on the screen
perfect.
as well. Okay,
Absolutely.
Akoma House, Akoma, akomahouseinitiative.com. So it has the you have the book there and more information about Akoma Day and how to celebrate it. Now, you all, you talked about relationships a number of times here. Now you all are also credentialed and relationship counselors, etc. Talk about your credentials. Talk about your background.
Well, we both have master's degrees in counseling.
Mhm.
And we have been counseling for, had to count, 15 years. Had to do the math.
Okay.
And
Right.
we've been to relationship counseling ourselves in the beginning of our relationship. And what we found, even though we were um, schooled at a Black college, we found that
Okay.
often a lot of the psychology around relationships is also still colonized, even in the instruction of how to counsel people, or it is the watered down version, much like Valentine's Day is of Lupercalia. It becomes a watered down version of our own teachings to begin with. So what
Right.
we said, even though we have a credential through what many people would say, is a westernized credential, going to a university, obtaining a degree, and practicing counseling. We believe
Right.
that counseling needs to be reformed in a way that is true to offering counsel from an indigenous perspective. So we need to add our African psychology to the
Mhm.
practices that make a great relationship. So although we both have master's degrees and we've practiced counseling, Montsho has practiced in um, many different kinds of formats and group counseling and individual counseling, through, you know, prisons, through schools. I have done a lot of counseling with families and with schools in the professional sense. And then we both, of course, have also a long line of initiation ourselves into indigenous culture. So in Nile Valley culture, in South African Botswana culture, in Dagara culture. And these are the things that we feel need to be fused. So definitely what we would call right now neuroscience, the understanding of your brain and how your thoughts work, but also not over explaining our natural beliefs and our natural psychology with English words. So neuroscience is definitely something our ancestors talked about. We talked about the idea that thought creates life and creates the world. We talked about the weighing of the heart, in Nile Valley culture, which is definitely what modern day counseling would call your emotional self, but often in credentialed counseling, for definitely for the Americas and for Europe, there's a separation of your body, of your existence. You can go to some counseling that's based on, your mind and your behavior. You can go to counseling that's very much like the pouring out of your heart. But very few counselors are going to have a unified approach to a mental understanding, an emotional understanding, and how that shows up in the physical world. And for us as indigenous counselors, we believe that many people are focused on the physical world first in modern culture. So what happens is you
Okay.
see the problems in your relationship, and you see what someone's actually saying and doing, and that's what you're focused on instead of what creates those things. So we definitely believe in ritual, and we believe in harnessing the power of the unseen things that lead to what we actually see in the physical. So we definitely use our credentialed experience. But some of the things that we lay the most claim to are not necessarily credentialed in the United States, which would be our cultural understanding, our initiation, our training for years with our elders and our guides. And I think that we are excellent at fusing what's practical for people, but also giving people real accountability in counseling, which often doesn't happen in our counseling culture. You can pour your heart out, you can go to counseling for 7 years, but there often isn't a lot of accountability to create change. And we need to be able to tune into things that are beyond what you might get in westernized counseling. So that is definitely working with your ancestors, working with the unseen things. Um, and that's something that we think more people need to take heed to, is what our elder called the African technologies. So those spirit technologies that you can use that absolutely change you. And by default, when you change, all of your relationships change.
Exactly. All right. So their website is akomahouseinitiative.com. You can get more information. You can order the book as well, because the books are you have them $10 and
Yeah,
$15. Now,
we also
go
have
ahead.
a merchandise line, T-shirts. We also now have Accommodate kits. We sold out of them actually now, but
Okay.
we have a whole line of merchandise to help posters that are very similar to the one you have up, that help you
Okay.
celebrate accommodating your office space at your home. We sell everything but the candles. We have a
Right.
line of things called the pocket rituals, which really are tools to help you to actually do some of the exercises and whatnot. So it's a full line at this point, and we're very grateful. We're this is African psychology, which the Sahu, by the way, is the root word of psychology, and it's in the Nile Valley transmigration of the soul called the Sahu became the root word to psychiatry and psychology. And these are just some of the things that, as Nwasha was saying, modern day therapy is not giving us. And so we're not
Right.
healing. Black therapists have been out here since the late 60s, early 70s, really doing their thing. And our families and relationships have gotten progressively worse. So something's missing. And the thing that's missing is our cultural understanding and application. Everything we think, speak, and do should be done through the lens of our culture. And I can tell you, having advanced degrees, Nawasha was about to get that PhD, but I was very disenchanted by what we were even learning at a HBCU. And we love our HBCU. We graduated from Lincoln University, but
Okay.
even the absence of some of the cultural perspective as we move forward in the next generation, and black people in the next 7 years, 40% of the world's population will be black children. We have to
Right.
have cultural center, not just chocolate covered Santa Claus, but a real
Mm.
cultural center the value system and the practices and the language. We're not romantic. We have 1,000 words. Maritik, Zamunye, it's Upende. It's so many words that represent Black love and Black, the expression of Black love. So many mythologies, Queen Nitocris, which is the foundation of the Cinderella story. All of this stuff around us is being hijacked from us, and we don't know anything about ourselves to even defend ourselves. And then we use the people who oppressed us as the standard of love. You want to be
Right.
romantic? That is clinical insanity.
That comes from the Romans.
Right.
That's the root. We're
Right.
dealing with the Romans.
Right.
Right. Okay. So to take a quick minute and talk about the Black Love School
Yes.
as well.
Absolutely.
You have that on your
The Black Love School is a newer thing. Akoma Day is much older, but the Black Love School is about 7 years old, 6 years old now, 5 years old. How old is it?
Oh, yeah, it is about 6. I
Yeah,
would say.
6 years old, and it's an international relationship academy for couples and singles. We do 2 master classes per month, audio visual, in a membership. The membership is currently $42 a month, and for $42 a month, you get all the Black love you could possibly handle. We do, as I said, 2 master classes that are audio visually recorded. And then 2 times a month, we come together. Every other week, we come together on a live Zoom call with singles and couples. And at this time, we're right about 50-50 for the first time. We're about 50% singles and 50% mated or married couples from about 11 countries in the world. We come together as Black people and we discuss whatever the subject of that class is. In the Black Love School, we move by semester, and each semester has a theme. So we're in the winter now, which is the culture of love, where the classes are about high science in the African intimate relationship. In the spring, we go into spring into love. All of the classes are about new beginnings and how to bring new energy to establish relationships. Summer is the heat of love, intimacy, and sex. All the classes are about that. And then the fall is the harvest of love, the larger community, friends, family, siblings, and how they interplay with the intimate relationship. Now, when you have your membership, your $42 a month, you have access to all of those classes, but we're as a group moving with the focus of the semester. And so we just happened to have a live call this past Friday, and we're on the class that's called Decolonize Your Love. And it takes you through African myth, African stories, African history, African architecture, so many things that are about African love, hundreds of words to say instead of romantic, and all of these different things that you need to understand. The story of Nitocris, the labyrinth, so many different things, Shashat and the fairy godmother. So many of these things that we are into today or that we're sharing with our children have been hijacked from our culture, and we don't know anything about it. And so we have to reclaim ourselves. We have to decolonize our love and then celebrate the art and science of Black love culture in our thought, speech, and action.
All right. Well, look, guys, this is some fantastic information that you shared with the African History Network and dropped on us. Everybody visit their website, AkomaHouseInitiative.com. Get the book, practice Akoma Day. It's practiced for 7 days, celebrated for 7 days, February 14th through the 20th. So Montsho and Nwasha, is great talking to you all again.
As always,
and you have a good
pleasure.
day. All right. All right. Peace.
Peace. Peace.
All right. Take care. Yep. Hotep. All right, family. Be sure to watch the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can support the African History Network, $, the AHN show through Cash App, $, the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. And if you missed my class number 1 of Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, from Saturday, February 11th, 2023. Go to our website. You can register for that. And my radio show is on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. Right now, it's Correct Wrong